talk about art generally, and it's best, of course, to look at art and experience it in the kind of silence of meditative, observational thing. So I'm going to declare a 53-minute moment of silence. And you can just, okay, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So, where do we start? Again, I consider myself to be primarily a painter, although I started off in art. And as Elizabeth was saying from my, I don't know where she got that biographical sketch, but I must have written it somewhere. And,
No, I just made it up.
but it's true. How'd you get? Yeah, when I started doing art, it was it kind of came out of a like a need to do something to express some of the anxiety and psychological stresses that were going on in my life at the time. I don't need to specify them now. But I walked into sculpture classes mainly at Queens College, and I was working with some people like Tom Doyle, Jake Grossberg, Larry Fane. And I felt really comfortable doing art, and I started doing metal sculpture. And I pretty much did it for like a year and a half, and made like a bunch of pieces. And I really enjoyed the process of like finding, discarded metal and building it up and cutting it and creating pieces. And at the same time, I was working with the figure, working with clay models and wax. And then at a certain point, I started to draw. I took some drawing classes, and then drawing led into painting. And I started painting. And then I realized I had all these sculptures and I didn't have any place to keep them, and do anything with them. So they ended up being like discarded, at the school that I made them in. And I realized for myself, like painting was more comportable. I could move stuff around better. And I started painting mostly from the landscape, because I didn't have a studio. I would just go outside and paint landscapes, mostly building, tree, road relationship stuff. And I still do that periodically. Something that I really, it's really like close to my heart, and I really enjoy it. And I was looking at a lot of art too. I was looking at a lot of mostly middle 19th century Corot, Courbet, and the Impressionists, of course, and post-Impressionist artists, Cézanne, of course, Van Gogh. And I learned a lot. And then I also started painting indoors, still life. I did still life, and some figurative painting, mostly in like school settings, And then I went to graduate school, and I went to a graduate school in Baltimore, the Hofburger School of Painting, which was run by Grace Hartigan at the time, and she was pretty much the, it was kind of a program where you had like one person, and you had this other person, Sal Scarpetta, who traveled between the different graduate programs, the sculpture and the two painting programs. And they'd visit your art, they'd visit your studio maybe like once a month, and Grace would do it maybe twice a month, and they'd have visiting artists, and that was pretty much the way the program ran. It wasn't very academic. It wasn't like a teaching program. It was like studio working program, and I worked a lot there, and I had a lot of really great conversations with Grace, and her whole thing was to like have you come out of that that learning thing, that thing that you your academic training, and to to become yourself, to find your own voice. So that's pretty much what I think I've been doing for the rest of my life, is trying to find that voice, trying to find a way of saying what I'm trying to say. Now, what is that? That's not something I can easily answer, because it's something that it's part of like a process, like the process of being, the process of looking, seeing, reacting. So, I painted, I moved back to New York, and I started to paint again, and then I ran into like the problems that a lot of artists run into, which are largely economic. You can't afford to live, it's hard to afford a studio, so I had an apartment, or I had a room I painted in, and I couldn't afford to buy paint anymore, so I started making three-dimensional things that hung on the wall, and similar to these types of things that I've gone back to and started to do more recently.
What are they made out of?
Excuse me?
What are they made out of?
I'll get to that, because they're made out of different things. But the original like impetus to do them had to do with this need to first of all make art, and to do it in a way that was somewhat economical. So I would be able to like find objects and fabrics and stuff, and just kind of piece together forms, and it was just like this like kind of like thing of the ones I did at that time were pretty much all black. And the reason why was just like I wanted them to be almost like paintings, like there was a kind of relationship with the wall, so that they almost seemed like they were like, even though they were coming out three-dimensionally, it almost seemed as though they would like at the same time being like kind of absorbed into the wall. It had that kind of in and out effect. They were made out of found stuff. I'd find wood and all discarded stuff. Anything I could put together. I used screw guns. I tied things together. I bound things with rope. I used fabric as a skin, and I think that's something that's in this little statement over here. I started getting into like the thing of using fabric was related also to painting, in a sense of like. Stretching canvas had the same kind of activity of taking this fabric and stretching it over something really taut. And so what I would do is I would like make these substructures out of various materials that like kind of, till they felt like they were kind of right, and then I would start draping fabric over them, tautening it, and painting over it. So it's size it on one hand, like you size a canvas with, I'd use everything like, gesso, lambskin glue, whatever, to get it so that it would be taut. And then I would paint. In those days, I was painting with, I started them with like a water-based, like Muralo black, which was really nice. It was a bucket of paint I got from working at a job that I did where I was painting sets with television commercials, and it was really good paint, So I used like that a lot, and then I started using this wrought black enamel, which was more permanent, and it would create these sculptural painting things. It's kind of like a liminal space between painting and sculpture, and. So then I kind of stopped doing those. I did them for a couple of years. I tried to like get them out in the world, and without very much success. And I have them. I still have a bunch of them. And so then I went back to painting, and I've been painting quite a lot, and showing periodically. And then about what's this? About maybe 8 years ago, I started making these things again. These object-oriented things at the same time as I was painting, because I had more time. I retired from a job I had as a teacher in the New York City public school system, And so I had the ability to be a full-time artist, you know, and so I started being able to do a lot of different things. And I started making these things again, and I was using same things, except I started making them freestanding in space, you know. So I made a bunch of things that were, you know, freestanding. It was somewhat like these. The earlier ones were more gray and black, and they had I used a lot of I used like ash in them, and I used lint. Like I like to use stuff that is discarded material that you can reuse in a way, because it has a kind of it has a history to it, which is, you know, it has a kind of underlying philosophical meaning. I don't like to like necessarily say what it is that they're about, you know, because what they're about to me might not be the same thing that they're about to somebody who looks at them. I want people to like look at them and get something from them that's personal, and, you know, and hopefully there'll be some, you know, coordination there, and we'll, you know, we kind of on the same page.
Eric, do you want to wait until the end for questions? Or
Excuse
can I
me?
ask a question now?
Yeah, sure.
Because
You want to ask another
it's
one?
related to what you're saying.
Okay, you want to ask another one?
Can I ask you
You
something?
want to ask another one?
No, wait,
Okay.
stop,
No.
answer. So my question is related to that,
Yeah.
this idea that you don't necessarily want people to hear from you what they're about, you want them to really look at them.
Yes.
So having lived with them for, I don't know, what's it been, 4 weeks or so, my observation is how much they reference classical sculpture. You know, the bulbous forms, they're definitely bodies. I mean, I gotta tell y'all, I've been in this gallery alone at night and thought there was somebody in the room, especially
Yeah.
this one. It's pretty profound.
Well, yeah, I think they are figurative. I look at this piece, I think about, I always thought about, I mean, I didn't intend it that way, but when I did it, I was thinking about that Rodin sculpture of Balzac that was in the Museum of Modern Art, the way it leaned, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what it reminded me of.
Right, and we were really pushing that when we were installing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can I ask the question now?
You want to ask another question?
I'm asking you another question.
This is a lot of questions. I don't know.
So-
You have to charge you extra. Go ahead.
So, to me, they're, and this is a compliment, oddballs. You know, there's something about these where you're really sort of going like, you're pushing yourself and your experiences and your perceptions, and you're asking for more and more almost extreme form. And
What do you mean by extreme form?
you know, these are uber bulbous. And honestly, to have something that's coming out from a wall this far in itself is really interesting. Because this is gonna grab me as I walk by, and I really like that about it. So I guess my question is, am I right that there is like a deliberate, and again, this is a compliment, peculiarity? Is there a deliberate peculiarity in your
Okay,
forms?
I would have to say that any peculiarity that you might be seeing in these was unintended.
Well, I really like that.
It's just, I think that has a lot to do with who I am. I think that, you know, there is a peculiarity to them, and they're kind of, you know, and I think the other thing you say is something it's a good point. The classical aspect of them, and I think about that a lot because I think a lot in paradoxes. You know, I think in my work. I get, you know, it's funny, we're going to talk more about the three-dimensional stuff than the paintings, because it's easier in a way, you know, because they're kind of physical things in the world.
I
Yeah.
see them very related.
We'll get to that too.
Okay, just
But what
interject.
I'm saying, like in the paradoxical aspect of like when Elizabeth pointed out the classical aspect of them, but I also see them as being like what classical means generally when we bring up the word classical, people think of, you know, classical Greek art, you know, But I see them also as being related to African art, to pre-Columbian art, Asmat art, and that's one of the things that I think about a lot is like to try to get at like a kind of universality of experience in my work, so that it's like, yeah, I'm like this Western oriented artist, but I've seen so much art from everywhere in the world, and I was so influenced by it. In fact, I think at the point when I started making the three-dimensional stuff again, I had a job at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it was like a night guard job, early watch. I worked from 4 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and there was nobody in the museum. And so a lot of times we'd be posted in various parts of the museum. Every night you'd be in a different post. But very often I was posted in the Michael Rockefeller wing, which has like some of this incredible what they call primitive art, even though there's nothing primitive about it. And there's like Mexican art, pre-Columbian art, Asmat art, which is from New Guinea and New Papua, and a lot of African art from different parts of Africa, each that has their own specific cultural history, And the thing about classicism is that there's a relationship that somehow or other to be able to like feel, and it's not like I like intended to do it, but I try to like feel out like the relationship in all of the art that I've experienced, to come to this kind of this universality of experience that enables anybody to look at the things I do and kind of understand them intuitively, because I approach the making of them completely intuitively, and yet when you say that, when I say that, I realize like nothing can be completely intuitive, because you have all the baggage of your intellect and your body of knowledge and all that. But still, like the approach, like the everyday going into the studio and working on things that are, in various states of, completion or near completion or about to be destroyed, or, it's like I always approach it with this thing of like looking at it and then reacting, and moving around through that. And I try, I don't know if I try not to think, but I really don't think I think too much about what it is I'm going to do, because I see what's there and I kind of say, well, let me do this. And then when you do something, it creates another situation, and I move on from there. Are there any questions? Any other questions? Yes.
So I asked,
Yeah.
what are these made out of?
Okay, so these are made out of different things. So primarily it's like the bottom piece is a tree stump, that I hollowed out a cylindrical hole, and I made it so that like a large thick branch of a tree would slide into it. So it's a slide mount. It's 2 pieces. The bottom piece is very heavy, so it holds it up.
Got it.
The stuff underneath this, though, is anything from plastic bottles, whatever, cans, wire, rope, a lot of hose. That's just screwed together in various ways and bound, like with fabric, sometimes rope, sometimes, so it create different forms that I can kind of screw together. And sometimes I look at it and I slop off a whole section and I add on a whole section, and then I'll take more fabric and kind of unite it with that. This piece originally was like a floor piece. It was like lying on the floor for a long time, and I didn't like it, and I raised it. I've done that recently with another piece. I guess I can't quite get the lying floor piece down yet, but it was like that kind of thing happens. It's an open process,
All right, now, but what is the actual surface finish?
Okay, the surfaces. So you can see in this piece has like a lot of different kinds of fabric in it. I like stretch fabrics, like like nylon type stuff, or I don't know, some, you know, stuff that you can really wrap around that's really strong, and you know, I could staple it, and you know, and then so I do the fabric thing, and sometimes I double it up, and then I paint, you know, and the paint is usually I begin it with like an acrylic paint, like a sizing, like medium, like a matte medium, which kind of tautens the fabric. You know, it tautens it around. Like if I have fabric around like hose, it tightens around. There's also stapled in there sometimes. Sometimes the color of the hose actually comes through. I kind of like those kinds of, you know, things that happen. And it's different kind of fabric. Like this is I don't know I forgot what this was, but it kind of looks like, you know, like mail from like you know, the Middle Ages. You know, the kind of stuff that's yeah. So like, and in these have different things going on. I started to use more oil based materials in these, like oil paint. And as a painter, you know, you have like a lot of paint that you just toss because but this gives me the opportunity to not, you know, to use it, to give it a second life, and you know, I'm able to like paint over the fabric. And actually, in these pieces, I actually used a lot of like oil rags, you know, like the, you know, again, stuff you would throw away and end up in a, you know, a landfill or something, you know. So it does that too. It has that kind of, yes.
So your stitch in the museum, that influenced you in painting this all with a celadon color?
This color?
Yeah, the celadon.
Yeah, you know, yeah. I was always really interested in that verdigris thing. Yeah, and that's very often something that's like, you know, not originally intended in the pieces, like bronze when it gets oxidated becomes this, but it's so beautiful, you know. And I used to actually take pennies and just put them in salt water and mine the verdigris and make these like little like collages. I have a whole bunch of them from the 80s that have, and really to this day, you know, like 30, 40 years later, it's still like the color is fast, and you know. So in this piece in particular, yeah, I was really interested in that that verdigris thing. This piece has, getting back to the materials thing, I started to use in this piece and in the yellow piece over there, if you notice that the front like zipper-like form, that's made from these types of things. These are water chestnut seeds, which you find like plentifully by the Hudson River. They're amazingly beautiful forms. And they're also really like indestructible, and don't step on them with bare feet, and there are millions of them, and they're actually kind of invasive, and they cause this like huge, like beautiful, but it's not really good for the river. You know, they can pretty much engulf a river. You know, you've probably seen it because you live right in different parts of the river. Yeah.
Did you ever meet Tony Smith?
You know, I never met Tony Smith.
I worked for him for about 8 years.
I might have met him. You know, it's funny because like when I first started doing sculpture, I was working with Tom Doyle, and Tom was a constructivist sculptor, and he once did a show at Sculpture Now. I don't know if you remember that. That was down on Green Street where Castelli's space was later there. It was later.
Yeah.
And there was a big show, and I think like Tom, Mark DeSuvero, Chuck Ginniver. I think Tony Smith was in that show because I might have, you know, met him peripherally. Yeah, so I don't think my work is very much like his.
No,
I mean,
it's
much more minimal.
No.
You know, and yeah, I don't think my work is very much like the people I studied with either. You know, but you know, still, you know, what I got from them was like this like thing about freedom, you know, being able to be free so that you can just do what you want to do, you know. And so they were good for that.
You had a statement on Facebook.
Did I?
Well, there was one that's why I'm here,
Uh-huh.
because I saw your name
Oh, really?
on Facebook and I saw a piece of the sculpture there, yeah.
Oh.
And
And
I'm a
what-
sculptor and so I saw them and
Oh.
it inspired me because I do
Did you
work.
message me?
What?
You were the one who messaged me?
Yes.
And you're,
Yeah, Morris.
Morris Schulman, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm glad you were able to come.
Yeah, I'm glad to meet you.
Yeah, nice.
Eric, I think Tracy has a question.
Yes.
I was just wondering, Eric, if you, I'm going to your paintings now.
Yeah, oh,
Do
good.
you, are you looking at something when you're painting, or are they equally intuitive?
They're largely intuitive. You know, like painting, again, as I said, I started painting from referential stuff, like, you know, landscape mostly, still life. I love still life. And, you know, this is something like about the metaphysical quality of form and space that I learned from that, as well as from the landscape. The different landscape painters that I've really loved, like in particular, like, you know, Cezanne and Morandi, they transform like the visual thing that you see into something poetic, you know, and you know, metaphorical, I guess, in a sense. I don't know, use those words, but I don't really often paint like imagery, although I kind of approach it all the time. You know, I don't.
Or it approaches you?
Yeah, it's like a back and forth experience, but I always stay close to form, and I think when you're close to form, you're always close to something recognizable. You know, something, even that's something like reminiscent of something. You know, a feeling that about. Yes.
Well, along that line of thinking, because I was wondering with the sculptures, are you concerned with concealing what is under there?
That is a very good question.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love the fact you brought that up. The word concealment. Yeah, concealment is something that I'm interested in, and I think it's because like concealment is a kind of psychological construct in our being, and like there's like I know a lot of people like work with found materials and they expose them. You know, you can see exactly what they're making them out of. But I never liked doing that. Like I liked using them as a substructure, almost like a skeletal aspect. And the concealment part, you know, it's like yeah, there's something about like you know, like when you're a painter or a sculptor, there's like a detective thing going on. You know, it's like, you know, it's like you're trying to find something, you know, and you're losing something, and you're, you know, so all that stuff is going on at the same time in your mind, and like the concealment thing is kind of interesting because I'll make something, and a lot of times I'll like just slice it right in half, and I'll expose the inside, and then I'll move it on to something else sometimes. So, but I don't usually leave very much of evidence of what's underneath it in the final piece. And I think that's a very good observation, and it probably says a lot more about me than I want to reveal. I mean, if you want, we can always psychoanalyze me. Anybody else with psychoanalysis?
Yes,
Uh-oh.
right there. What I feel when I see the paintings though is almost the opposite. It's almost like innards being exposed.
Huh.
And I feel like there's such human pain
Yes.
that's going on. Not to get into your session, but is that intentional or is that just, oh my God, that's what happened?
Well, I think like I'm a pretty happy person, but I do have a lot of deep like empathy for the human condition, and the human condition, when you really look at it, is not good. You know what I mean? Like there's so much horror and so much pain, and we don't want to like dwell on it, but in a way, you know, it's like the thing in art of trying to make something that's beautiful, but also like, but also kind of revealing of our internal, you know, I don't know what the word is.
Condition.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I mean, we all, you know, all of us, I mean, I don't want to get into a total philosophical treatise, because I do have like a lot of thoughts about just the nature of being human, and the nature of, you know, we're a very particular type of animal, you know, because we're an animal and we're also this other thing, you know, and we seek, you know, something, it's why we seek divine, you know, imagery and inspiration, you know, and of course, a lot of art comes out of that, you know, a lot of the history of humans making art comes out of, like, the desire to make something that reflects our inner anxiety about death, you know, and life. Yeah.
Yeah, did you add material to your paintings to create this imposter stuff that you are as a sculptor? You know, did you add sand, did you add anything?
Yeah,
to
you
create
know,
more
I
textures?
don't, you know, I almost consciously don't. And I've thought about doing it many times. I think I might have once in a while. I think I might have slipped in like a piece of canvas or something.
Right.
But again, I usually mask it. I do, okay, so in a lot of these small ones that you see, they start off, and some of them are almost completely done with like acrylic paint, and it's a process that I called acrylic paper fusion. So what I do is I'll paint on paper with acrylic paints, and I never liked painting with acrylic paint because it had like this kind of too plasticky feel to it. So the paint would absorb into the paper, would dry, and then I would soak it in like water and leave it sometimes, and it would take on it takes on more of a matte effect, and then I place it back onto the canvases, and I would you know, move around, paint, and then paint over them, and then sometimes not in too many of these, but in the earlier ones, I would draw over them with pencil. I would sand them down. It was a whole process, you know. And I was making these things that were really like close to the surface, you know. They were really kind of mad and like internalized pieces. And I worked that way for a long time because I was breaking away from painting with oil paint, because oil paint is really expensive. It's very expensive, and it's hard to like, especially the way I paint, because I build up painting. If you, like some of these paintings, I know Elizabeth can attest to this, some of these paintings are really heavy. And sometimes the smaller ones are heavier than the big ones.
Yeah.
It's like crazy, like the one behind you, don't move. That paint is really heavy. Because there's a lot of paint on it, you know. Even though like when they're finished, they're kind of, the surfaces aren't that, you know, turgid, but there's a lot of underlying turgidity, I guess. But so getting back to your question or statement, yeah, I don't usually in the oil paintings, when I paint with oil, I don't usually use any other kind of materials on them. Partially because of the kind of logistics of oil paint. It's like you can't like paint. You can paint oil over acrylic, but you don't want to paint acrylic over oil, you know, because it's just gonna break right off. So with the later acrylic paint, most of these small ones here, you know, again, I did the same thing. It was the same process, but then I would go back into them with oil paint. So a lot, and then I discovered this new thing, which was like water-based oil paints. Like they're called Artisan. I think they're made by Winsor Newton and Cotter, and a couple companies make them. And at first I was like, nah, this can't be, you know. But I started using them because I wanted to use something that was like less toxic. Because I have like a little studio in my house that I use a lot when I'm not in my largest studio, which is outside of the house, where I make the larger things and bigger paintings. So I got this stuff, and it kind of worked, you know, because it works with acrylic. You know, you can, because it's water based, so you can actually mix the. What I do very often is just mix that oil, water, whatever they call it, artisan base, with like an acrylic medium, and then it'll dry really fast. It'll dry as fast as acrylic paint, but it has more of an oil paint kind of luminosity and feeling about
Wait,
it.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
I missed something right there, that detail. You mix the water-based.
Yeah, well, sometimes I'll take the paint, the artisan paint, the oil-based, the water-based oil paint,
Uh-huh.
and just paint right directly over the acrylic.
Okay,
You know.
but you didn't mix it with a medium,
But I do mix it with a medium sometimes.
with an acrylic medium?
Yeah, because it's like mixing with water. You can mix it with water, so why can't you mix it with that? So I mix it, and it dries fast, and when it's on your palette, it just dries, which is all right, because I just use like a cardboard palette. Another thing like I started doing I liked with acrylic, is that the acrylic paint, when it was on like a plastic surface, you can like peel it off. And I got these like peelings, and I like peelings because they're kind of like, they're completely dry and they're all, kind of, and I would very often like place those on a painting and, sort of highlight stuff and, so it's like an open process. I like the openness of the process more than I like painting with oil paint, because oil painting is like, it's not that, it's like you paint and, you slug it out, and it's not like with those, I can like take a knife and cut off a whole section and just add another section. I had a lot more freedom. And
I will say,
really like
I'm
that.
getting an idea for
Yeah.
a book called When Sculptors Paint. Because to me, these are sculptures.
Yeah.
And part of the gentleman talking about what is in here, right? It's a really important question, and there's a lot of mystery in the sculpture which transfers, in my mind, into the paintings. They're mysterious. What are they made of? What is he thinking about? What are they? And to Tracy's question, are you referencing landscape? Are you referencing what you see around you?
Mm-hmm.
I get almost another feed which is more about a microscope lens.
Mm.
These are like micro shots of
Yes.
a massive something that
You-
lives
you-
in your head.
Well, your questions are good because they kind of always get back to that the same thing I was talking about before, the last question you asked, that there's this thing about paradox, and when you talk about the microscopic, well, it's like I always like to think about the dichotomy between like the microscopic and the macroscopic, because very often like what you see in an electron microscope and what you see in the Hubble telescope, that kind of look alike, right? There's a kind of a mysterious relationship between things like that, and I was fascinated by that.
Getting back to what you were saying about the human experience, how much did teaching, where you were teaching, affect your work?
Yeah. Okay. So my experience in teaching was interesting. I taught in the New York City public school system. I taught art mostly, but I taught a lot of other things. Whatever. Very often, whatever they needed somebody. The system was kind of broken when I went into it in the '80s, and the schools I worked in throughout my years as a teacher were always like in kind of like the worst situations for that a school could be. There was a lot of crime. There was a lot of sad stuff and a lot of great stuff. Because there's always that mix. There were a lot of kids who were underserved their whole lives. They'd come into I started teaching in high school, and then I got bounced down to middle school. And in middle school, I loved middle school kids in a way because it was like this transition point where the tragedy of their childhood, like lack of the negligence that so many of these kids grew up with, really was starting to come out, and they would either act out in ways which were negative behavior, but kind of like understandable, or they'd be like really like the sweetest kids, like needy, really needing love, and so for me, You know, like I was always like, I wasn't like a teacher who really, like, I didn't teach in any kind of way that, I didn't go to teacher school. You know, I never learned how to be a teacher. My family, my father was a teacher, everybody in his family was a teacher. It's like the family business, you know. So it's like we're kind of like natural teachers, you know. We're just so pedantic, you know. And so then I ended up, the larger part of my career, I taught in a high school in Canarsie in Brooklyn, and it was a tough school. But the kids, you know, like I really liked the kids, and I was very like I was very like easy on them, you know. I taught art, and it was always art appreciation. There was rarely anything else, except I started to teach ceramics, because the ceramics programs used to be under industrial arts, and when they were on industrial arts, it was always run by some industrial arts kind of guys, you know. But they had ceramics under industrial arts, and ceramics is like a wonderful art form. And I didn't study ceramics, but I did a lot of clay. I knew how to handle clay. So I started teaching ceramics, and so I took over the ceramic, when the ceramics, the old time ceramics teachers retired, they didn't have industrial arts programs anymore in these schools, but they kept this shop, and so they put it under the art department. So I was able to teach ceramics, and I'd have like a lot of kids in there just playing around with clay and making stuff. And I taught stuff. You know, I taught like all the techniques except the wheel. I kind of stayed away from the wheel because there were too many kids to, you know, teach the wheel. And I wasn't like great at control. Like, I'm not a disciplinarian, you know. I feel like I have like a kind of inner discipline myself, you know, like in terms of my life, and I think I try to like allow that. And I really, even though I wasn't a great disciplinarian, my classes weren't like totally out of whack, you know. There was some, you know, the kids came in, they knew what they had to do, or what, you know, if they wanted to work, they worked. Sometimes they didn't want to work, it's fine, you know. It was like I tried to keep it relaxed and comfortable, you know, and I was able to do that. I was able to get through that without a lot of stress from like the department heads and everything. It's changed a lot since. Like things have gotten tighter in the schools. I don't think I could do what I did now, you know. And I think that's true in university programs too. Like the teachers that I had in Queens College, like I could teach like that, but what they're doing now in a lot of the university programs, it's too structured, you know, it's too much, department stuff and curriculum, you know, rigidity and stuff like that. Yeah.
Actually, I was also interested in how did teaching them affect your own work?
Yeah.
The feedback from it.
You know,
Did it?
I don't think it did, but I don't know. Maybe it did.
I mean, because
you know, it's like
you were working with the people, you know, the kind of situations that you,
yeah,
you know, the human condition.
Yeah. So
you were in the middle.
That's why I said that. Like I don't think it did, but it probably did. You know, it's just like, you know, you just go around in your life, you're living in New York City, and you know, you get on the subway and you see what you see. And I grew up in New York City, and I saw a lot of stuff from the time I was young. You know, I remember going to the Knick games at Madison Square Garden in the 1960s, and there were like 30, 40 people sleeping in the subway station. You know, and that was like in the 60s. You know, people talk about homelessness. They didn't even talk about homelessness in the 60s. It was like it was something else. You know. And it was terrible. It was like Calcutta, you know, like it was a slum, you know. But you know, that kind of things affect you, you know, and you kind of so it's like, how do we react to all that? You know, it's like you can't, you know, it's very hard to like just like take it all in and so you, a lot of it you take in, but you have to find a compartmentalize it in a way, you know. And I know with like teaching, like I taught, you know, in a public school situation, which is like for an artist was like, you know, like you might as well be in Siberia, you know, in terms of the art world, you know, because it's a completely different world, you know. And I could tell stories. They ushered the kids around really quick. They were so afraid that they would touch a painting and stuff like that. It was terrible. I never liked the feel of that. I would want them to just like explore the museum, just stay, don't touch anything, just, you know. But you know, a lot of them they didn't really like that. They liked to, you know, have a control over the situation, which I didn't really like. But yeah, you know, like, how does it affect you? It affects you. And again, I think like my work and my, you know, my whole, you know, who I am, you know, it's all there. You know, I can't really say specifically, you know, where it comes out or
It's
how
in the
it
work.
comes out.
Yeah, and you know what else? I think your opening is about to start, so we.
Oh, okay, great.
But thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming, and